Hello, Ryan. Oh, I'm so happy to have you, my brother.
Oh, I'm so excited to be with you virtually. I wish I was sitting next to you and we
I
were just
know.
recording this.
I know. I love it because I think we know each other for about a year now in a circle, and we've never met physically, but I do feel this very like brother connection to you, and I'm looking forward to that day that we do get to sit next to each other.
Mm,
So,
me too.
I have so many seeds. I was thinking about our conversation. I was like, oh my gosh, we can go so many different places. So I'm going to plant some seeds and then I'll ask you a question and then we'll see what happens. So I would love to, you just brought into right before we press record, the 4 agreements. So I'd love to explore that a little bit with you in your journey, specifically going through the journey of sobriety. And you have started so many amazing projects. So I want to touch in on some of the ones that are near and dear to your heart, particularly the one that you and I spoke about the last time we talked about your new vision and where you're going. So those are some seeds for us potentially, whether we get to them or not. But for now, Dr. Ryan, who are you? However you want to interpret that, and what are you bringing to this world right now?
Yeah, so I think best describes me is that I was just at the creek barefoot, meditating and grounding, talking to the trees, and picking up trash on my way home. And on the way there, there's a little park kind of in between. And so I just kind of pick up trash. And I was thinking about this because just yesterday or the day before, I was doing the same little hike down to the creek. And these kids saw me throwing garbage away. They were playing volleyball and they said, what are you doing? I said, oh, just throwing away garbage. And they might have thought that because their like cell phones and shoes were right by the garbage can.
Mm.
So I don't know exactly why they were asking. But all of a sudden they said, wow, like that's awesome that you're throwing away this garbage that you just found along the way. And I said, yeah, I just walk the creek. And, it's like if I see it, I pick it up. And that day I had handfuls of garbage. And one of the kids, as I was walking away, said, what a good Samaritan. And like they were playing, like poking fun. But what I was thinking was, oh my gosh, like what seeds does that plant? To just see like a random person walking, picking up trash. They don't know who I am. They don't know that I'm a nonprofit leader or that I've a post-traumatic growth expert or an author, best-selling author, or this and this and this. It doesn't matter. It's egoless, right? Like that image of just like this person. And so like that was what I was when I was thinking about like leadership. And I was like, that is pure leadership. Like when you just are living your highest and best, your truth, and inspiring others and planting seeds and loving them along the way. I mean, the next day I came through and there were like 10 water bottles in the park. And I don't presume it was those kids that left them. But even if it was like, I'm not going to be angry or frustrated. I'm just going to pick them back up and throw them away and set an example for whoever else sees it. So that's an obscure way to describe myself, but I think that's really it. Like I have things that I've done and things I'm doing and things I'm working towards and groups I'm involved in and nonprofits I've started. I'm literally just filing a 501c3 today for a new nonprofit that maybe we'll talk about. It's a 1-year recovery program that's on site. And just all kinds of really cool, fun things. But at the end of the day, like those don't define me. I feel like those moments when I'm just really grounded in like that's who I am, right? Like that's my true essence and that's my true spirit. And some of the best work in the world that I've done is just by showing up and being me. It doesn't have to be like an accolade or accomplishment or a resume builder, right? But like it's just those times I like go pick up trash. And I've had countless people stop me and ask me and tell me, oh, you can throw that garbage in our garbage can as you walk by anytime. Or, ladies, in my neighborhood stop me and she goes, you live in my neighborhood, because we were down the way pretty far. And I was like, yeah. And she's like, why are you picking up this trash? And it was like, just because I see it and I pick it up. And I told her the story about the lady. I was right by one of the houses that they said I could toss it in the garbage in the garbage can. And I said, yeah, even this lady stopped me one day and told me I could throw all my garbage in her garbage can so I don't have to carry it home. And like, and I thought if we just plant seeds to take care of the world, to take care of others, to take care of ourselves, I think that is like the best form of leadership. And I also think it is the like me, and if you put me in a little bubble or box or whatever, that would be like the best
Mhm.
way to describe me. But yeah, I'll let you ask questions because there's a million things I could talk about.
Oh my gosh. First of all, thank you for the most amazing answer to that question, because I ask that for everybody, and I love it. I love it so open-ended because I love to see how people see themselves, and you even brought that in, like you started with this beautiful story, and you do have a very, comprehensive bio. You've done so much for, especially being so young, of a person, of, like where you are in your life, but you've done so much. And I love that you brought that in, because that is what I feel too is true embodiment of leadership, is just showing up on your street and picking up the trash, like you said, and being that change that you want to see in the world, whether you did affect those children or your neighbors. They're at least, you're bringing the awareness to it, right? And they're going to now start to make perhaps more conscious choices. And that's so powerful.
And it really feeds into the four agreements, which maybe we'll talk about at one point,
Yeah.
some point, but it's like not making assumptions one way or the other. Like I might make an assumption way long time ago before I was introduced to this book, and before lots of my kind of inner journey, which is still in there. I'm still inner working every day, but I might have made an assumption like, oh, I made such an impact on those kids, or oh, I didn't make any impact at all. And
Yeah.
either way would be an assumption, positive or negative. And so it's more about just being authentic, which is really like the leadership style. Like from an academic standpoint, I studied leadership studies at a doctoral level, so like I know all about the theories and blah blah blah. And but I was thinking about like what leadership style is like the best describing of me, and I was like service-based leadership, yeah, charismatic leadership, sure, but that can be feel kind of sometimes not the best to me. When it's not authentic. And I was like, ooh. And then that was like, I was just thinking about this today, right outside of meditation. And it was like, that was the answer of like, my true style of leadership is like an authentic leadership, which just means you show up and you are authentic. If you are upset or happy or whatever, you show that, but you rein it in, right? So you're able to like control, self-regulate your emotions. So like an authentic based leadership takes like a lot of self-regulation. Um, so anyway, I just thought about that as like, it's just funny. You just don't know who you're
Mhm.
impacting and when and why. And it's like, it doesn't really matter. It matters if you're being, for me, in my experience, it's like, if I'm being authentic, that's when I touch the most people. Even if I like go out of my way to make this big program and I like do all the marketing for it, blah, 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 and get like people there. It's like the times when it's just really organic also still makes large impacts, maybe even larger impacts, because it's not like a pre-planned, predetermined thing. It's like in the moment, it's being present. So it's like the intersection of being present, being like really mindfully present, and then also being like authentic as well. And then self-regulating comes in because you have to be able to like discern, which is the fifth agreement, if we ever get into that. But I don't, anyway, so much to talk about. So I'll let you kind of
We
guide us.
do. No, no, that was powerful. We're here, we're in the agreements. Well, for anybody out there who doesn't know what the four agreements are, can you share a little bit about that? And then, yeah, dig in deep, go where you want to go, my friend.
Yeah. So the Four Agreements is a Toltec wisdom by Don Miguel Ruiz. And there's four of them. And really there's a fifth one that he wrote another book called The Fifth Agreement. But I'll focus probably on the four and just say the fifth agreement is using discernment for the other four agreements and just for looking at life. So, being analytical, but also present and mindful. But I'll focus on the other four because those are the ones that really I'm drawn to. So there's be impeccable with your word, which doesn't just mean be honest. It means to me, like, be honest with yourself. Like, those are sometimes the hardest conversations to have are the ones with yourself. For me and my journey, it's like, it's easy to see from like an outside point of view or like feedback from others or whatever it may be. But it's like those true moments of like, am I being honest with myself about whatever it may be? And it could be about what's inspiring me in the moment. It's like, where do I want to go work wise, or what do I want to do here, or how did I show up as a parent? I have a almost 12-year-old in a couple weeks, and she pulls out these agreements in me like no other, because that relationship tends to be one of my most challenging, but most beautiful. And challenging because I think I co-parent with her mother, and it's difficult sometimes, like having two different households with two different belief systems. Though her mother's household is wonderful, and her mom's a school therapist. She's very intelligent, very caring and kind, but it's just different ways of living. And so this kind of being impeccable with your word pops up for me, and like when I kind of self kind of analyze, or looking at where I'm going, where I'm at, what I'm doing, and also just being honest about those pieces. Because I think sometimes it's easy to say, well, these 5 people said this about me, so this must be who I am. Or this 500 people said this about me, so this must be who I am, good, bad, and different. Which really leads into the next agreement of like not making assumptions, and not taking things personally, which I think those are 2 separate agreements, but I think they play really well together. At least for me, in my experience, like they play so well together. They're really intertwined, because I have found myself at times in life, good, bad, and different people commenting on who I am, or even like, let's use this as an example. Someone gives you a compliment day after day. Oh, you have the prettiest eyes, or you have the best hair. And then you start to believe like, oh my gosh, I love my hair and my eyes. But it's coming from these people's compliment, and it's not necessarily coming intrinsically from yourself. And I think compliments are beautiful, and compliments that are authentic and real are so needed in this world. Kindness is a real thing. It's one of my core beliefs. But how this plays in is that sometimes we end up making that our reality, just because other people say it. And just as we do on the good side, we do on the bad side as well, right? Like, you have bad skin. I'm using physical appearance because it seems, but it could be anything. You have this, and this, or you're just going to be this. You're never going to amount to this. You're not going to do this, whatever it may be, that rhetoric that people repeat. It's about not taking it personally, because it really has nothing to do with you. And that can also be on the good side for a compliment. And what I've learned though as well is that when someone gives a compliment, really honoring that, because it's a gift. It's a gift to you, but it's not making it who you are. And so we could get real in the weeds there with that conversation. But I think for me, it's really about, like, I've seen it so many times happen for me personally. Oh, Ryan, you're such a great this, and this. And then it's like, oh, am I good at this? And then it doesn't leave room for that being impeccable with your word piece of like, where am I really at? What am I really doing? Were they simply inspired by that moment of the day? And what work do I still have to do on myself while still loving myself through that work? Like, it's very complex. It's not like a simple, these are 4 agreements, but they are like a million kind of situations or agreements kind of within them. But it's just a really good guideline for how to show up in the world and be present, to show up for yourself and others. It really, really helps. It helps too when you're making assumptions, right, about one thing or another, about another person, about a situation. You might say, oh my goodness, this just happened to me. I just sent a 112-page proposal to investors we're working with on a large project. They've already given a verbal yes, thumbs up, we're going forward. It's a $3 million project. It's great. We're really excited. But it's been 3 or 4 days since I've heard back. So, my mind starts going and making assumptions like, oh my gosh, well, what if they changed their mind? Or what if they did this? You start playing the what if game.
Yeah.
And what this agreement's taught me is I stop playing that what if game. And if I have to play a what if game, I'm going to change it to a what if it's good? What if they're putting together a proposal? They're working with another mixed capital investment organization, and like, what if they're just really like getting stuff together and they're going to just present it to us and say, here we are, here's our proposal to you, like, we've been doing all this work behind the scene. Or if I'm going to play a what if game, I decide to make it what if it's the things I really want to happen, not the things that I don't want to happen? So I think, it's not a toxic positive way to live, because I had at times in life been viewed as that. I mean, that's feedback I've been given from leaders in the community or whatever. At times, especially, right around when we started our nonprofit endeavors around 8 years ago, we started a nonprofit called Love Must Win. We stand for love, acceptance, and kindness. So it's like, seems fluffy, though we have very deep psychological based programs that are really impactful. But people would see it as like fluffy, and me as fluffy, because I'd be bubbly and happy and hugging people and doing this. And it was authentic to me. But I've learned that I also can't make assumptions and I can't take it personally, because it was nothing about me, the way they felt. And it was nothing about how I showed up or what I did necessarily, as it was more about them. And that's a piece of that, really learning, because at a time in my life, I heard that, and I was like so upset. I'm like, I'm not toxically positive. Like, I'm like genuinely positive. And I still go through my shit, right? I still go through my stuff. And so it hurt me in a lot of ways, because it's like, I'm working so hard on myself. And I hear this, and it's like, people think that I might be being disingenuous. But then I really started diving into these 4 agreements, right? Like, not taking it personally, not making assumptions, being honest with myself about where I am, and maybe being more honest with others and saying, look, yeah, I'm really positive, but I'm not always positive. I don't wake up every day like that. And that's normal. And, I think that that piece of authenticity, is layered. And you kind of peel out. I don't always love the onion approach, but like, as you become more authentic to your real self, you're able to share those deeper layers. And where I was, 8 or 7, 8, 9 years ago, I didn't go as deep as I do today. And I'm sure later on in life, I'll go even deeper, but as I learn and grow. And then really the last agreement is always do your best. So this is easy, because I feel like if you're doing the other 3 agreements and just, living your life from a place of those, you're really doing your best. And it's funny, because I wrote in my book about, I call it bestism. And it's about doing your best. And it's very similar to the agreement of always doing your best. Because I found myself at times in life being a perfectionist, wanting things done really the way I wanted them done. And it might not even have been perfect, right? But it was my idea of perfect. And I really had to work on that journey of just honing in and saying, what is my best in this moment? And that might be different than yesterday or a month ago or a week ago or a year ago or 2 seconds from now. But my best is the best I can do. And it's not about beating yourself up when you recognize that wasn't my best. It's about acknowledging it. Like for me, what I do in this agreement is I just like kind of make a marker, and I say, okay, that's one of the areas I didn't do my best today. I'll try in the future to step up and do my best, but I'm not going to beat myself up over it, right? Because that's that perfectionism piece. Like, oh, I'm going to be perfect, and I'm going to beat the crap out of myself when I'm not perfect. Or even in situations where it's like my dogs were just barking. It's like, oh my gosh, like what if it was, this is not perfect now. But it's like, it is perfect. What if someone on the other, like, listening is like, oh, I love dogs. They see my little husky run in the background, or my kid, or, my partner. And it's like, it makes them happy or does whatever. And it's not my place to make that assumption about what is perfect for the situation as well. So it's about, for me, it goes deeper than just your own best. It's like making the best out of situations, and tying in those other agreements. They all really tie in together really well. And that's kind of like the cherry on the top. It's like, if you do the other ones, that's like your ice cream and your toppings and your whipped cream, and then you get to the cherry, and then it's really just kind of like a bow on the top, or a little treat when you get there, because it happens naturally when you're doing the other pieces. Or you could start the other way. If you're really doing your best, then you're doing all those other things naturally, organically anyway. So, but I just love this book because I feel like it really takes it piece by piece for you in a really spiritual, but in a real way. It's sometimes we read spiritual books or listen to spiritual things, and it seems so out there for some folks. And this is a book I really suggest for like anybody, no matter what your journey looks like in that world, what kind of belief systems you hold or whatnot. It really does kind of like transcend the dogma of like religion and spirituality, I believe. And that's why I love it, because I think it's palatable for so many folks. I've actually never met anybody that I didn't feel like it was a good fit for.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it feels, I've studied a bit of it, and I can also see the threads because I come from teaching yoga and practicing yoga for years. So I also feel the threads of like Satya's, the truthfulness, and but what you were speaking into it, and I love hearing your interpretation of it. And when you were speaking into it, I really saw these checkpoints, like I've made this agreement, but also using this as an inquiry. And I was smiling when you were speaking into like the physical compliments that people give you, because and also on the other side of that too, because right before we got on, my grandmother insisted that I put my hair up because I looked a lot prettier like that. But I had this moment where that used to really upset me, and I said, you know what, I like my hair down today. It was a beautiful checkpoint for me to see the word you used was authenticity. It's like, well, what feels authentic to me? I like my hair down and I feel good in it. And I'm not going to let this other person get in my ear. And the other thing I wanted to respond to what you were speaking into, like the bubbliness, because I think that you and I are a mirror in a lot of ways, because we both have this, what you called, like, some people have accused you of toxic positivity. And I feel that too. People think that like I'm pretty, happy-go-lucky, and I'm very calm. I always get that. I'm very calm. But I also know that you have, and I have, like a really challenging past. Like you overcame a lot. And sometimes when we have these perceptions of somebody being outgoing and love wins, that they don't realize the depth, right, of what you've actually done to get there. So I would be curious to know if you don't mind sharing a little bit of your personal story of how you've got to this place.
yeah, well, it starts ever. I've learned how to give this in about 5 minutes, so we'll do our best because it's long. But it starts
Beautiful.
when I was really little. I was like 3 or 4. I knew I was different than the people around me, like my brothers and my male friends, especially my stepdad, my dad. I was like, I don't feel like them in a lot of ways. And then had my first thoughts of like ending my life when I was like really young, like 6 years old.
Mhm.
And then started to realize like why I was so different, because I fell within the LGBTQ plus community. And on top of that, I had like this religious like undertones that I had heard growing up from like extended family, especially, not even directed towards me, right? Like it was like secondhand or sometimes tertiary, like understandings of what they would say and do around like gay people go to hell and things. And so I started to think, well, gosh, if God hates me, then I should hate myself, right? And the universe must hate me too, like all of it. No matter what you kind of look at as God, my my thought then was like, everyone hates me, the world hates me, the universe kind of hates me, everyone hates me, and so I should hate myself. And so I ended up hating myself more than I think you could ever hate another person. And hiding who I was. So then I turned to drugs and alcohol, and had multiple suicide attempts, all kinds of things, real heavy stuff. Eventually got on opioids. So I was on that, well, on and off for years, but really bad right at the end of that. And funny enough, it was like this conversation with my drug dealer at the time, um, who talked to me about her belief in God. And that looked a little different than maybe like the super Christiany, God, but it's still rooted like biblically. She knew a lot of the Bible verses and things, but she was just saying like, my version of God loves and accepts everybody.
Mm.
And something just like in my heart, like it felt like something like fell apart. And I think it was that hard shell around my heart, that all that hatred for myself, because it was like I never really heard that, or maybe if I heard it, I didn't listen. But I was literally listening. I really believe. It's funny. This person, Marie, is such a beautiful human. And despite being a drug dealer, right? I think there's so many misconceptions about people that
Mm.
might use, especially like marijuana or whatever. But she was a marijuana drug dealer, is different than maybe a hard drug dealer or whatever. But regardless, the point is that like in that moment, this person that I would have never thought had a spiritual belief system or whatever, like shared it with me. And it like broke my heart. It broke off this coating on my heart. And then my heart just like I could feel it. Like it was something like I could really feel it. And we were done with our conversation. I went to my bathroom, fell on my knees, and just asked God to save my life. I don't necessarily know. I didn't really know what I was doing and at the time, but it was just something I felt like I had to do. So I did that. And, there's tons of other stories and pieces to that, but eventually I was able to like get sober and stay sober. There's tons of stories with it. And I looked up and there's a sign in my bedroom that says faith. And so I feel like now I'm in my office, but, and I feel like I have to share this now, but, that next day after that conversation with my drug dealer, I was taking her to work. And I said, now that I believe in God, which there's a whole story about that too, about some synchronicities. But I said, now that I believe in God, how do I have faith? And how do I find my own faith? Not like the faith of my family or the faith of these, this dogmatic, hurtful faith. And we were talking about it, and she goes, you'll find your way. You'll find your faith. It will work through you naturally. And I promise you, the one license plate in the whole state of Kentucky, because that's the state I lived in and still do live in, that said faith was right in front of me as I pulled out. So I was like, okay. So I started realizing these synchronicities, this connection. I started getting these things I call God bumps, which are just goosebumps. But I call them God bumps because I get them in times of like really deep connection, times of really deep synchronicity, times of really something that I need to take note of, and started receiving all these messages in all kinds of ways. And eventually was able to get sober, stay sober, which that was a little journey. But I've been 11 years now opioid free, and about almost 10 years completely sober, and about 7 years caffeine free, which I would say is the hardest one out of all those. But anyway, maybe not the hardest one, but it was for me in the moment. I was like, this is tough. I don't want to give up this caffeine. Everyone has caffeine. I can't have caffeine. Anyway. And from there, my journey I almost got kicked out of college because I hadn't attended classes for like a whole year almost, because I was snorting lines of pain pills and partying and whatnot. And I'll give a kind of a backtrack story a little bit, but by the time I stopped hard drugs, before I stopped, I stopped the opioids before I stopped all the rest. And before that conversation with my drug dealer, it was about a month before that, I was sitting in my car and I just snorted my last line, and I was on my way to class, trying to go to class, whatever. And this song came on the radio, and what I saw was my daughter, who had just been born about 9 months before that, 10 months before that. I saw her sing me this song as a grown adult. And I saw that her life was like really tumultuous because of me, or one of the reasons, right? And I was dead or in a ditch, and I kept seeing all these things. Like I was dead, like I saw myself dead. I saw myself laying in a ditch, presumably gonna die. Saw myself like addicted to opioids or heroin because I was just about to switch to hair. Like I just like the week before that, I was like really contemplating, like, because it was cheaper and other things. So I was like, and I knew once I did, I was like done for. And but I didn't do it. So that was great, because this journey might have looked way different for me. But I saw her singing me this song, and it was just as this reminder of, in that moment, it was like my first awakening, I feel like, because it was like, I don't want to do that anymore. I want to stop the cycles, the familial traumas and cycles that caused me to get to where I was at, or piece of it, right? Because a lot of it was that self-hatred, but like the familial aspects also added to it, in lots of ways. And so I was like, I have to be the dad that I always needed growing up for my kid. And who would have known that would be a long journey and a hard journey to like build back up from, when my daughter's mother knew I was on opioids and on drugs, like to rebuild your life. And that's a whole story. But yeah, it was just like that moment of like, I have to do this for her. So like, she doesn't end up where I'm at, like suffering. And, kind of fast forwarding back to where we were, I got back in college and blah, 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 and went back to a master's program because I was called to in meditation. And then and I always thought why. I'm like, I don't want to do this. Like, I don't love school, whatever. And it was really because when I was in that program, we started the nonprofit Love Must Win. And And then other things transcended from there. But yeah, I think that's a good kind of overview of like some of the trauma and things, even though it's just kind of skimming the surface. But it's funny when my mom always says this. My mom's a really beautiful healer. She's a therapist by trade, and we're really best friends. But she always says, like, it almost seems like it was a different life, doesn't it? And I said, yeah, because we had a lot of trauma together and a lot of trauma created by each other in our relationship. And it was like, wow, it really does almost feel like a different life after you've had these awakenings and these awarenesses and these moments of like transformation at the most authentic level that we can talk about transformation, but really doing the work as well after that. It's not just like, oh, here's an epiphany, here's that awakening, here's that shift. I like the word shift by Wayne Dyer. He has a movie called The Shift. And funny enough, I ended up watching that movie right when I had one of my biggest shifts ever, right at the beginning of my awakening processes. And just so in synchronicity with what was going on with me. So much so, like, you couldn't even make it up, right? Like, you couldn't even like make it up. And that's, to me, that's like these synchronicities always kind of help remind me of where I'm at. But looping back to those pieces of like being connected and working through familial trauma and really, really, truly authentically getting there. Sometimes it doesn't feel like it was your life like before, because you've done so much work and you're like, was that me? Could I have done those things that I did, those awful, mean, awful things? And that's like a whole process in itself, right? Like, how do I release that, like, past, like, you know, that piece of yourself that feels like, did I really change? And I know that there's this, you know, rhetoric that ran around 10 years ago, before that, I'm sure, that people don't change. And I think that was such a toxic statement, because I've seen more people change in so many ways that I can't even explain, miraculous ways. Like I'm talking, like, I'll use the example, like, Bible thumping, throw a Bible at you because you're gay type of people, to literally one of my dear friends, Pastor Ed, marches in every pride parade he can and is the biggest advocate for LGBTQ plus people and people of color. And he is a self-proclaimed, like, racist bigot, homophobe, and this was 10 years ago. And now he literally had worked for the Underground Railroad Museum here in Cincinnati, Ohio. He led in his church, led all the queer initiatives. And he's not queer himself. He's just an ally, true ally. And that reminds me that people can change. If you stood at the pulpit one day and preached hatred, and now you can preach love to everyone, you've had changes that, like, are so hard to even describe. And so, I think that I've changed in those ways in some ways as well, in lots of big ways, as I think we should throughout life, right? I think there's phases we go through, there's changes we always go through if we're really growing. And it was a little kid the other day. It wasn't my child, it wasn't Harper. It was another kid, I can't remember. It was around Harper's age though. And they said, yeah, I don't think you ever stop learning. When you stop learning, you might as well not be here. And I'm like, I always say that. They read my book. So this little kid's really, really enlightened over here. But I was like, yeah, like, you have to keep learning and growing. And that learning can be formal, academic, it can be personal, it can be relational, it can be spiritual, it can be whatever you want it to be, but just keep growing and learning. And I think that's kind of tying in with my story. I just feel like it's really powerful to keep and to have that humility, right? Like, of the humbleness of knowing, like, I don't know any, like, I might know, this is what I always say, I might know a little bit about a little bit of things, and that's about it. And that's great, because I'm an expert in some areas, right? I'm literally a subject matter expert around post-traumatic growth. That's what I wrote my dissertation on, and that's what I did lots of research on, and about to be published in a journal on that and things. And but I just know very little, right? Even about that, I just know little pieces of things. And so we have to keep our minds open and our minds humble and our hearts humble to know that we don't know everything. I think that's one of the biggest, like, fallacies that can kind of creep up sometimes, especially in the spiritual community. It's like, I learned everything I can learn. It's like, no, there's so much to learn. Like, anyway, so I'll stop there and let you kind of jump in.
My gosh. Well, first of all, thank you for sharing your very vulnerable story. I felt it deeply. I don't know how much I shared with you about my past, but my father was potentially you in a lot of ways. You know, he was a drug addict, he was a heroin addict primarily the time that I decided to leave home. And but what we did end up on a very beautiful note because he got sober the last handful of years of his life and he came back into my life as an adult when I was an adult, and we had 4 years before he passed where we could heal. But when you spoke of that, I felt that deeply of him having that moment too of basically checking himself. Um and when what really struck me in that moment was what you were sharing was that you really saw it in a place of being a leader for your daughter, like making that change initially externally for somebody that you love so deeply, but that got you on this journey of loving yourself more deeply. And then because of that, I definitely want to touch in on this project that this endeavor that you're starting, because what I keep thinking about hearing this story, I knew a little bit of it, but then we went deeper with it and where you're going, because you shared a lot with me last time we talked. It really feels like this idea of your karma, your lessons that you brought into this world, your soul is your dharma, is your purpose. And what you're doing in the world right now, what you've been doing the last 10 years, but really where you're about to go, it just feels like completely your purpose. Do you want to speak into that, and also your, as you share a little bit more also like that transformation as stepping into this leader through that process?
Yeah. So I'm so excited because we're launching and we're in the middle of really getting things going. We just applied for a large federal grant, which will be times 10, hopefully next year. We're plotted to hopefully receive it. So hold the intention in space and for this year and next. But the program is called Elemental Recovery, and it's a 1-year program. There are multiple parts to it. And the biggest piece is a 1-year on-site recovery program through the 4 elements. You spend 3 months in each element, and then you really dive into the 4 agreements. And there's some alignments, which are like areas where kind of like expand on the 4 agreements, like how to live those 4 agreements in like more simplified ways. So that kind of helps. But really, the essence of what we're doing is pulling people on to a beautiful piece of I don't even like the word property, right? It's like this beautiful haven oasis place in South Central Kentucky, in Appalachia, called Snug Hollow. It's 300 acres on organic farmland. It's a holler, so it's cliff to cliff, peak to peak, summit to summit, and it's like a really safe bowl. And so it's a prosperous like bed and breakfast now. So we're going to continue doing that piece, but we're going to have the employees of this eventually. You know, it's going to be a transition period of a couple years and get everything up and going. But we'll have them on site, so there'll be 6 to 8 employees that really kind of run the bed and breakfast, get paid, of course, to do it, live for free on site, and really dive into this like healing journey through the 4 elements, the 4 agreements. And these pieces of just and the land is just so special. Like it is such a healing place. Not to get too woo woo, but there's lots of vortexes and just portals there. It's very powerful. It's very sacred. Even people that come to the land that aren't necessarily like even know what a vortex or a portal is, will walk away saying this place has really powerful energy, or I had lots of transformations that happened here, or I had this and this. And so the land has not only called us there to live, but the land has also called us there to bring some folks who have really struggled with addiction and recovery. And then we also have another branch to that program, which is a peer support program that'll be open to the public that will look like a similar peer, like it'll be like a familial, familiar, not familial, but to like a traditional peer support group, but it will have the 4 agreements and 4 elements embedded in it. So it will be like a different process that we really think is going to be really powerful And then we're going to spend the next year, we're going to send out some surveys locally to providers and surveys to potential participants to really like survey the ecosystem in that region, to make sure it's like a 14 county region. And then we're also going to use that to inform our curriculum as we build it out. Now we have the basis of the curriculum built, but we're going to use that to really inform like our policies, procedures, processes, things like that. And we're really just seeing it like from a spiritual level, like it's already done, but like the academic-y pieces and the pieces to like fit in with the current like medical systems. I mean, this has already been preliminarily supported by like the county health department and a couple medical organizations in the area and the region, and some colleges that are wanting to partner to make sure that we have like a workforce development pipeline. So we're going to develop and work on some programming to really make sure that these folks have stability when they leave our program. And so we also are going to offer like a $15,000 or $16,000 gift to each participant that completes the program to help them with like transportation and living and those kind of pieces, because that's one of the 4 pillars of like recovery is like stability and like housing and career and all of jobs and things like that. And so we really think the program from like a left brain, analytical sense is like really something that's not out there, but really from that right brain, like heart-centered place, is a program that we really feel like is going to make really large impacts in the region, and hopefully sets as a model that we're able to extend outward to other organizations, like behavioral health organizations and things like that, just because it takes out the dogma, and it takes out that kind of like religious undertone or overtone to like AA or NA, which there's NA and AA are wonderful. They save lives every day. So many, I mean, you can't speak enough good about what they're doing, but there is a disconnect for a lot of like people, especially like queer folks, who are like, don't align with that because of, religious trauma or spiritual trauma. And so we're really making something that's like, has no dogma to it, and has some spiritual elements that don't feel spiritual or don't feel dogmatic. Not that there's nothing inherently wrong with spirituality. So that's the way. I don't think I can do anything and not be like a spiritual vibe to it. But we really are like looking at how we can create this where it's not, it doesn't trigger all those traumas. And that's really what a lot of my research looked at through the doctoral process. And so as a leader, I think it's important that we don't just think about, this is what I would want when I was in recovery, because like that would have been great if I had something like this, but that's a piece of it. But we look at all these other elements and we make sure that we're tying in local and regional folks. We make sure we're working with people. We make sure that we're, making sure the participant is at the center of everything that we do. And I think that as a good leader, that can be challenging sometimes because you have in your mind what you want to do, right? Like I do this all the time. I'm like, oh, I want to do this. And I come up with this huge PDF or presentation and it's like, okay, but, when you present it or whatever, and then you're like, oh, those are really great ideas. But there's this ego part of you that's like, I want to keep doing what I wanted to do. And that's not being a good leader. I mean, being a good leader is being able to pivot, being able to shift, being able to, and also to stand tall and strong. I've not wavered on one time talking about this project with the 20 plus folks I've talked to in the region, lots are all in the professional world, in the nonprofit world, or really the substance use disorder sector. I haven't pivoted away from my story. I haven't pivoted away from, like watered it down to make it more like palatable for them. It's like, I just tell them like, this is what we're wanting to do. And this is the 4 elements. And this is why the 4 elements are so powerful. Let me tell you what about, fire, air, earth, and water, and why we're doing this process this way, and what those elements can really transmute and transform in people. And I think that could be seen as really like out there, like just to the professional folks. But I haven't got that once from anybody. And I haven't felt that energy from them either, because I think when you have that true belief in something and you're kind of spieling that, I think it also lets people see that, and it lets them feel what you're saying, not just, hear it. And so I've come up with that a little bit too, like in my journey so far with this. I'm like, it comes up a little bit where you're like, oh, should I say that? Because these are like real academic people. This are like or whatever. And it's like, no, say it. And every single time people are like floored and like, this sounds like something that we need, because it's a totally different kind of avenue that we haven't really looked at before. So yeah, I'm really excited about it. It's definitely something I haven't talked much about. This might be the first time I'm sharing publicly.
Ooh,
So I'm honored to do so, but you know, yeah, I'm really excited. Like the excited doesn't, appreciation is what comes up for me, which to me is like beyond gratitude vibrationally, appreciation. So I'm like really appreciating the process and appreciating all the folks like putting stuff together, and you know, from the academic side, from the medical side, from the on the grounds people in the recovery programs, to even like government wise, which I never thought I would say, but I'm being really appreciative of like the opportunities that like some federal grants can offer and things. And this is like a perfect fit. So I think even at times when we think, oh, I don't want to utilize that or this, it's like, if it's in the highest and best for everyone involved and everybody's winning, then that's really like in alignment for me. If everybody's a winner, then it's for me. So anyway.
I love that. Yeah. I mean, it feels like this whole journey of us sharing today is that idea of being centered in the four agreements and also the four elements is really what has held your ground and holding space for your vision, but then also being that guide for holding space for potentially this vision that you are holding for other people, their space for transformation. And you're taking it, like what I loved what you were saying about that, because another conversation we're having in this summit is the open and inclusive supportive spaces. And you really spoke to that already, of like knowing the vision, being centered in that, but then also really having the participant being in the center of that, and considering them, not just what your vision is and sticking to your ego, but actually bringing in who you're actually holding that space for. So that's so powerful. And oh my gosh, I want to listen to you and chat more forever and ever, but I want to honor both of our time. Can you share anything else in terms of how people can be in touch with you and follow this, you know, vision coming to fruition, and anywhere else, anything else you have to share?
Yeah, so you can find all my kind of stuffs, including like social media and stuff like that, on my websites, just ryanjosephAllen.com, or you can look up my drug dealer brought me to God.com. It's going to take you to the same site. But, you know, and then, you know, if you're going to buy the book, buy it from me, not Amazon, unless it's cheaper on it. You just never know. Sometimes Amazon will run a good deal, but yeah, so, you know, things like that. So you can find it there. Yeah, I'm just really honored to be a part of this. And I think as I was really thinking about leadership, I thought, well, gosh, I studied this at like, you know, from a really, you know, great, you know, I think the best university in our region, and about leadership from some of the best professors, some of the best, like people in the field that were actually weren't just academic leaders, but they were leaders in other fields and things. And what I really took away from that program was this sense of, you know, there were so many nuggets about whatever, but at the end of the day, it was like, no one's going to know, you don't know going into leadership 100%, like the right things to do, or you can have the right things in your mind. Like, I know from an academic, from a theory standpoint, this, and this. And it's like, but when you really get in it, it's what I talked about before. It's around like being able to recognize like where to pivot to and how to pivot, and how to hold space for not just your vision, everyone else's vision, and how to sometimes even put your vision aside to hold the vision and space for others. And I think that was powerful for me through the journey of watching these really beautiful leaders teach me from like an academic standpoint. But like the thing I really got was that in leadership, it's just so important to really think about why you're doing it, right? Like, what's your purpose in leading? Are you just leading to lead? Are you leading because of ego? Are you leading because you were told you should lead? Are you leading because your grandma said you're the best leader in the world? Are you leading because in middle school you were vice president of student body or something? I was. Just laughing because it's funny because my life went really downhill after middle school. But as far as like, things. But it's funny because you hear that and you think, oh, I should be a leader. But what's calling you to leadership? Like, what is your call to leadership? What impacts do you want to make? How can you make room in the room for other leaders to emerge? Recently, I resigned as our executive director of our nonprofit, which I was for many years, about 6 years or so. And I resigned the last couple of years and still in the transition process of that because I'm always the co-founder. So I'm always kind of there, but really trying to transition to let other leaders come in and live their vision, right? Letting go of the vision I had for Love Must Win and letting their vision flow. Still same principles, still same core values, but let them run with what they feel. And I think letting go of our control is a huge piece of how we can be really good leaders. It sounds like counterintuitive because you're like, oh, a leader's supposed to control and work and help and guide. And it's like, in some ways, yes, but in lots of ways, no. And kind of really intuitively feeling into how to be the best leader you can is also really important. So I could dive into that forever, like intuitive leadership, which is really probably my ultimate leadership style, with that authentic leadership base. But yeah, I think there's so much to talk about. There's so many beautiful stories we're going to hear in this summit, and I'm so excited to just be a part of it and to listen and learn. And thank you for putting together such a beautiful space for people to come together and just learn about how to be a better leader. And one last thing is, like, everyone's a leader. You might be a leader in your family. You might be a leader at your HOA for your community. You might be a leader of an organization or of your friend group or whatever. Or maybe you're just a leader by yourself by picking up garbage on your way home from something. That makes you a leader because you're setting an example. So just know everyone's always a leader in different ways and different avenues. So don't feel like you have to accomplish anything to be a leader or do something to be a leader outside of what you maybe already are doing. We're just being intentional about that, right? So I use the trash pickup because I think it's funny, but it's also true. Like, if I saw someone picking up trash, I'd say, well, it's like, that's a leader, and that's a leader I want to get to know because we have common interests or whatever. So just know it doesn't take a degree or whatever, even to be a leader. You just show up and be authentic and really be yourself. And I think that is like the best way you can be a leader.
Yes. Full circle to that. I love that. That is very much our message, is you are the leader you've been waiting for. You are definitely the leader we've been waiting for. So thank you so much, Ryan. It's just such a joy, and I can't wait. We'll definitely have to do another summit, maybe around intuitive leadership, and have you back. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Soul Sister.